The tale stretches back to an era when the American frontier sprawled vast and untamed, a land of raw beauty and unrelenting hardship, its edges fraying as the shadow of modernity crept westward. This is the story of the Vanderlinde gang, a chronicle carved into the dust of forgotten trails, murmured in the rustle of leaves across endless plains and shadowed peaks. It is a saga of loyalty forged in fire, of betrayal etched in blood, of dreams that flared bright against the twilight of the outlaw's age, only to fade beneath the relentless march of time and fate. The year dawns 1899, but the roots of this tale plunge deeper into the chaos of the 1870s and 1880s. Zrenia, when the nation still bore the scars of the Civil War, the West was a tapestry of opportunity and danger. Gold glittered in California streams, cattle trails stretched from Texas to Kansas, and the railroad's iron veins began to bind the wilderness. Towns sprouted like weeds, Armadillo, its streets baked under a relentless sun. Tumbleweed, a dusty outpost clinging to life as ranchers moved north. Strawberry, a logging hamlet nestled in pines, its air sharp with sap and sawdust. Beyond these fledgling settlements lay a world unbound, plains where bison roamed in thundering herds, their numbers dwindling as hunters took their toll, mountains where grizzlies ruled the shadows, their roars echoing through canyons, rivers like the Dakota and the Lanahatchee, carving paths through lands the law had yet to tame. Into this world stepped Dutch Vanderlinde, a man whose story began in the ashes of war. Born in 1855 to a Dutch immigrant and an English mother, he knew loss early. His father fell in a Pennsylvania skirmish, a Union soldier cut down in '63, leaving Dutch and his mother to scrape by in a Philadelphia tenement. By 15, after his mother's death from sickness and despair, he turned his back on the East, drifting west with nothing but a grudge against a society he saw as cruel and hollow. He stole to survive, honed a quick hand with a revolver, and nursed a vision of a life free from the chains of order. Dutch devoured books, Thomas Paine's fiery calls for liberty, Rousseau's dreams of a natural man, shaping a philosophy that the frontier could be a refuge, a place to defy the greed of banks and barons. That vision took root in 1874 when he crossed paths with Hosea Matthews outside a saloon in Kansas. Hosea was a man of a different cut, born in the 1840s, a son of the frontier with a past as colorful as the tales he spun. Once a small-time actor in traveling shows, he'd played Shakespeare to half-drunk miners in Colorado, his voice weaving magic before he turned to cons, fleecing the gullible with charm and a deck of marked cards. One scam saw him peddle fake gold dust to prospectors in Montana, a grin masking his sleight of hand. His wife, Bessie, had softened his edges, and for a time they lived honest, running a homestead in Wyoming, its fields golden under summer suns. But her death to fever in the late 70s broke him, sending him back to the road. A widower with a heart worn but kind. When he met Dutch, their fates entwined, a brash idealist and a seasoned trickster united by a shared disdain for the world's hypocrisies. Their first score was a bank in Lawrence, a clumsy job that netted them $200 and a posse on their tails. but it lit the spark of a partnership that would burn for decades. The gang took shape slowly, a gathering of the lost and defiant. Arthur Morgan joined in 1880, a boy of 14, his parents dead. His father, a petty crook, hanged in 76 for robbing a stage near Omaha. His mother gone to illness years before in a Dakota shack. Caught stealing chickens near a Nebraska farm, he faced a beating until Dutch intervened, seeing in the scrappy youth a son to raise. Hosea taught him to read by firelight, tracing words in a tattered Bible, while Dutch showed him the reins, guiding him through blizzards and shootouts. Arthur's youth wasn't all hardship. In 87, he met Mary Gillis, a girl from a decent family, her smile a fleeting warmth in his rough life. Their love faltered under her father's scorn, but it left a mark, a softness he buried deep. John Marston followed in 84, a wiry 12-year-old orphan, son of a Scottish drunk and a barmaid, both lost to cholera in Chicago's slums. After a botched theft left him dangling from a rope in Illinois, Dutch cut him down, binding him to the fold with a debt of life. John's early days were wild. He once stole from the camp's pot, earning a scar from Hosea's knife as a lesson. The camp swelled with others, each a thread in the gang's ragged tapestry. Annabelle, Dutch's first love, danced into their lives in 82, a saloon girl from Missouri with dark eyes and a laugh like spring rain. She was his muse until Colum O'Driscoll, leader of a rival gang, slit her throat in 85 during a feud over a botched robbery near Denver. 3 of Dutch's men died in the reprisal, a wound that festered in his soul. Bessie Matthews stitched their wounds and cooked their meals, her stews simmering over oak fires until her death left Hosea hollow. Susan Grimshaw arrived in 79, a widow turned thief after her husband fell to a bar fight in Texas, her stern hand shaping the camp's order, her voice cutting through the chaos like a whip. Bill Williamson, a discharged soldier drummed out of the Army in 88 for brawling, stumbled in during 89, his temper a match for his strength, his loyalty born of a need to belong. Javier Escuella crossed the border in 96, fleeing Mexico after knifing a man over a woman in Sonora, his guitar a balm for restless nights, its strings singing of a homeland lost. Younger souls filled the ranks. Lenny Summers, a bright boy of 19, joined in 98 after robbing the men who lynched his father. A freed slave taught to read, murdered for it in Alabama. Mary Beth Gaskell, a runaway from a cruel uncle in Ohio, slipped in with nimble fingers honed by pickpocketing, her dime novels a quiet escape. Tilly Jackson, escaped from slavery's echoes in the South, found refuge in 95 after fleeing a plantation foreman's wrath, her resilience a pillar in the camp's heart. Sean McGuire, an Irish firebrand whose father fled the Great Famine, swaggered in after a bar fight in 97, his tales as wild as his aim. Uncle, a grifter claiming Civil War valor he never earned, drifted in with tall tales and a knack for dodging work. Kieran Duffy, a skinny O'Driscoll deserter, lingered on the edges, his fate tied to a later capture. Charles Smith, half Blackfoot, half black, joined in 98, his bow silent and deadly, his past a flight from a broken reservation life. and Sadie Adler waited in the wings. Her story tied to a tragedy yet to unfold near Coulter. The gang numbered 20 or more at its peak, a roving family bound by Dutch's creed to rob the corrupt, to live free, to defy the gears of progress, grinding the West to dust. Their days glowed with the warmth of summer, the air thick with pine and leather, the plains of New Hanover rolling endless before them. Golden grass bent beneath, a sky vast and unbroken, the distant lowing of cattle, a faint hum across the hills near Hennigan's Stead. Stagecoaches trundled along trails worn smooth, their gold plucked under moonless skies near Rhodes or Diablo Ridge. They haunted towns like Valentine, its streets churned to mud after spring rains, its saloon a haze of tobacco and whiskey, or Blackwater in its quieter days, a trade hub where steamboats coughed smoke along the docks of Flatiron Lake. The wilderness was their sanctuary. The forest of Big Valley rustled with deer in shadow, elk grazing under twilight. The Dakota River glinted silver under noon's glare, its banks soft with clay. The wind bore the tang of sagebrush through Grizzly's canyons, deep and still. In 1993, they camped near Strawberry, its logging camps alive with the whine of saws, its air sharp with sap and damp earth after a storm. In 1995, they wintered in Ambarino, snow blanketing their tents near Lake Isabella, wolves howling beyond the firelight as Dutch read aloud from a tattered pamphlet on liberty. The Indian wars had faded, the Cheyenne and Sioux pushed to reservations, their lands opened to miners and ranchers. The world turned, and with it came whispers of change. The Pinkertons, agents of a new order born in Chicago's labor crackdowns, hunted men like Dutch with growing zeal, their badges gleaming in the gaslight of cities back east. Railroads stitched the land. Cornwall's trains hauled oil and timber. Barbed wire fenced the plains. And the bison faded to memory, their bones bleaching under the sun. Yet Dutch clung to his vision, a haven beyond the law, a fortune to fund it. His voice rising over the crackle of campfires, promising a tomorrow that seemed ever out of reach, as the frontier he loved began to slip away. The tale shifts now to the spring of 1899, when the dreams of the Vanderlinde gang collided with the hard edge of fate, their story etched in the chaos of Blackwater and the frost of Coulter. The West had changed since the gang's early days. Railroads crisscrossed the plains, towns swelled with settlers, and the law grew teeth. Blackwater stood as a beacon of this shift, a trade hub on the shores of Flatiron Lake, its docks alive with steamboats hauling cattle and cotton, its streets lined with clapboard shops and saloons. Once a sleepy outpost, it had boomed in the 90s, fueled by ranchers like Hennigan and oil whispers from the north, its wealth drawing men like Dutch Vanderlinde, whose eyes gleamed at the promise of a big score. Dutch's plan had simmered for weeks. A ferry, the Grand Corrigan, heavy with cash from banks and cattle barons, docked overnight in Blackwater's harbor. It was no small dream, $150,000, enough to buy land, to vanish to California or Tahiti, to build the haven he'd preached for years. The gang had scouted it for months. Arthur rode the trails, noting guard shifts. Hosea worked informants in the saloon, his charm loosening tongues. John watched the lake's edge, restless and eager. Micah Bell, a latecomer recruited in '98 after a bar brawl in Nevada, left 2 men dead, pushed for the job with a grin too sharp. He joined after Dutch found him holed up in a shack near Reno, his gunslinger bravado masking a hunger for chaos. Hosea urged caution, sensing a trap in the ferry's heavy guard, but Dutch's fervor drowned him out, and Micah's whispers fanned the flames. The heist struck on May 10th, a morning thick with river fog. The gang moved in silence, Arthur and Javier at the docks, Bill and Lenny on the rooftops, Dutch and Micah leading the charge. But the plan unraveled fast. Gunfire erupted before the first vault was cracked. Some say a Pinkerton spy tipped the scales. Others blame Micah's itchy trigger finger. Chaos swallowed Blackwater. Bullets tore through the mist. Townsfolk screamed from windows, and the ferry's deck ran red. Davy Callender fell first, a bullet through his chest, his twin Mac shouting his name as Pinkertons dragged him off, wounded and cursing. Jenny Kirk, a sharpshooter who joined in '97 after fleeing a broken home in Boston, vanished in the smoke, her body lost to the lake or the fray. Sean McGuire was snatched by bounty hunters in the retreat, his Irish curses fading as they hauled him north. The money sank with the ferry or was spirited away by the law, and the gang fled, a posse of Pinkertons and deputies on their heels. The flight was desperate, a scramble through dusk and dawn across the plains of West Elizabeth. Hooves thundered over sagebrush, wagons creaked under wounded men, and the air hung heavy with dust and fear. Dutch led them north into the Grizzlies' east, where the land rose jagged and wild. The mountains loomed, their peaks cloaked in white, the wind a mournful wail through snow-laden pines. Snow fell thick, a late spring blizzard that buried trails and froze breath, slowing their escape. Coulter waited. An abandoned mining camp from the gold rush of '62, its cabins sagging under frost, its streets a graveyard of rusted picks and broken dreams. Miners had fled decades ago when the veins ran dry, leaving whispers of ghosts in the timbers, the silence broken only by the creak of wood and the storm's howl. The gang hunkered down, their numbers thinned. Arthur's coat bore a dusting of snow, his hands raw as he tended the fire, its glow a frail heartbeat in the dark. Dutch rallied them with promises of tomorrow, his voice steady despite the loss, while Hosea nursed a wound from a stray bullet. In the biting cold of the Grizzlies, the Vanderlinde gang sought refuge in the abandoned mining town of Coulter. The relentless snowstorms and treacherous terrain made survival a daunting task. Amidst these challenges, Dutch Vanderlinde, ever the strategist, emphasized the need for resources and information about their adversaries, the O'Driscoll gang. He proposed a reconnaissance mission to a nearby homestead, which reportedly served as an O'Driscoll hideout. Accompanied by Arthur Morgan and Micah Bell, Dutch led the expedition through the snow-laden paths, their horses trudging through deep drifts as the wind howled around them. The journey was arduous, with visibility limited to a few feet ahead. After a grueling trek, they arrived at the homestead known as Adler Ranch. From a distance, the ranch appeared eerily quiet, its structures blanketed in snow. As they approached, the faint glow of lanterns became visible through the frosted windows, accompanied by the muffled sounds of male voices and raucous laughter. Recognizing the potential danger, Dutch signaled for a cautious approach. Dismounting their horses, the trio stealthily advanced toward the main house. Peering through a window, they observed several O'Driscoll members inside, indulging in stolen provisions and oblivious to the impending threat. Dutch, prioritizing the element of surprise, devised a plan. He would create a diversion by knocking on the front door, while Arthur and Micah would position themselves strategically to ambush the gang members as they reacted. Dutch rapped on the door, and moments later, an O'Driscoll opened it, his expression shifting from confusion to hostility. Before he could react, Dutch forced his way inside, drawing his revolver. The sudden intrusion threw the outlaws into disarray. Seizing the opportunity, Arthur and Micah stormed in, weapons drawn. A fierce gunfight ensued, the crack of gunfire echoing through the homestead. Despite being outnumbered, the trio's tactical advantage and marksmanship quickly subdued the O'Driscolls. As the dust settled, the house fell silent, save for the heavy breathing of the victors. While surveying the aftermath, Arthur's attention was drawn to a faint noise, a subtle creaking as if someone was moving stealthily above. He gestured to Dutch and Micah, and they cautiously ascended the narrow staircase leading to the attic. Pushing open the attic door, they were met with a heart-wrenching sight, a woman, disheveled and terrified, clutching a broken piece of glass as a makeshift weapon. Her eyes darted between the intruders, filled with a mix of fear and defiance. Recognizing her distress, Arthur holstered his weapon and raised his hands placatingly. "Ma'am, we're not here to hurt you," he said gently. "Name's Arthur Morgan. We're after the men who did this to you." The woman's grip on the glass shard tightened momentarily before her shoulders sagged in exhaustion. They killed my husband," she whispered, her voice cracking. "They took everything." Dutch stepped forward, his demeanor softening. "You're safe now. What's your name?" "Sadie," she replied, tears welling in her eyes. "Sadie Adler." Understanding the gravity of her ordeal, Dutch offered her sanctuary with the gang until she could determine her next steps. Grateful yet grieving, Sadie accepted, and they escorted her back to Coulter. In the days that followed, Sadie grappled with the trauma of her loss. The gang provided her with support, and she gradually integrated into their makeshift family. The once homemaker began to exhibit a fierce resilience, her sorrow fueling a determination to survive and seek justice for her husband. This transformation marked the emergence of a formidable ally within the Vanderlinde gang. As Sadie Adler's journey from tragedy to tenacity began. Amidst the biting cold and dwindling supplies, a pressing concern gnawed at the group, the fate of John Marston. He had ventured out on a scouting mission days prior and had not returned. Abigail Roberts, John's partner and mother to their young son, Jack, was fraught with worry. Her pleas grew more desperate with each passing hour, compelling Arthur Morgan and Javier Escuella to undertake a perilous journey to find their missing comrade. Equipped with determination and a sense of duty, Arthur and Javier mounted their horses. the crisp air biting at their faces as they set out into the snow-laden wilderness. The landscape was a treacherous expanse of white where visibility was limited, and the howling wind masked any distant sounds. As they pressed on, the terrain grew more challenging, with steep inclines and narrow ledges testing the endurance of both man and beast. After hours of arduous travel, a grim discovery halted their progress. John's horse lay lifeless, partially buried beneath a blanket of snow, its body bearing the unmistakable signs of a wolf attack. The sight intensified their urgency. Javier fired his gun into the air, the sharp report echoing through the mountains. Moments later, a faint, strained voice responded, a beacon of hope amidst the desolation. Following the sound, they dismounted and proceeded on foot, navigating the treacherous path with caution. The cold was relentless, sapping their strength with each step. Eventually they found him, John Marston, slumped against a rock, his face pale and etched with pain. A deep laceration marred his face, a testament to his encounter with the wolves. His eyes, though weary, reflected relief at the sight of his friends. "Arthur, Javier, I knew you'd come," John murmured, his voice barely audible over the wind. With no time to lose, they carefully hoisted John onto Arthur's shoulders, mindful of his injuries. The return journey was fraught with danger. As they neared their horses, the ominous growls of wolves reached their ears. Emerging from the tree line, a pack of 3 wolves advanced, their eyes gleaming with predatory intent. Arthur, with John still on his back, had limited mobility. Javier, recognizing the imminent threat, drew his revolver, positioning himself between his friends and the advancing predators. The first wolf lunged, its powerful limbs propelling it forward with alarming speed. Javier's shot rang out, striking the beast mid-leap, its body collapsing into the snow mere feet from them. The remaining wolves, undeterred, circled closer. Arthur, unable to engage directly, shouted, "Javier, to your left!" as another wolf prepared to pounce. Reacting swiftly, Javier pivoted, discharging another round. The bullet found its mark, and the second wolf fell, its momentum carving a path through the snow. The final wolf hesitated, a low growl emanating from its throat. Sensing an opportunity, Javier took aim, his breath steadying despite the cold. The shot echoed, and the last of the pack crumpled, the threat neutralized. With the immediate danger past, they secured John onto Javier's horse, ensuring he was stable before mounting their own steeds. The journey back to Coulter was a race against time, the elements, and John's deteriorating condition. The path was treacherous with icy trails and the ever-present risk of another wolf pack. Upon their return, the gang members rushed to assist, guiding John into the relative warmth of one of the cabins. Abigail's eyes welled with tears as she saw him, relief washing over her features. The group's makeshift medic tended to John's wounds, cleaning and bandaging them with the limited supplies available. As the storm raged outside, the gang huddled together, the flickering fire casting long shadows on the walls. The successful rescue of John Marston provided a glimmer of hope, a testament to their resilience and unwavering commitment to one another amidst the unforgiving wilderness. He had ventured out prior to the heist's collapse and had not returned. Fearing the worst, Arthur and Javier Escuella brave the treacherous slopes in search of their lost comrade. Their journey led them to a precarious ridge where they found John, grievously wounded and clinging to life. His encounter with a pack of wolves had left him scarred, both physically and mentally. With great effort, they transported him back to Coulter, where he began the slow process of recovery. As days turned into nights, the gang grappled with their predicament. The weight of their failed endeavor in Blackwater hung heavily over them, a specter of doubt and regret. Yet in the face of adversity they found strength in unity, each member playing a role in their collective survival. Dutch, ever the orator, spoke of new beginnings and uncharted territories. He painted vivid pictures of a life free from the constraints of law and civilization, where they could carve out their own destiny. His words were a salve to their wounded spirits, instilling a renewed sense of purpose. However, beneath the surface, tensions simmered. The harsh conditions and close quarters magnified personal grievances and unspoken resentments. Trust, once the bedrock of their community, showed signs of erosion. In this crucible of ice and isolation, the Vanderlinde gang faced the dual challenges of external threats and internal discord. Their journey was far from over, and the path ahead promised trials that would test the very fabric of their bonds. The grizzlies were a crucible, their beauty stark and unforgiving. Pines bent under snow, their needles shedding in gusts that swirled through Katora Springs, where hot geysers hissed beneath the ice. The camp's lanterns flickered, casting long shadows on the cabin walls, the air sharp with frost and pine sap. Dutch sent Micah and Javier to scout. Micah's men, Lenny and Pearson, holed up in a shack near Lake Isabella after a botched job, their rescue a tense ride through drifts and gunfire. Pearson, the camp cook, once a Navy man who'd sailed to Panama, grumbled over stew, his tales of storms at sea a drone beneath the wind. The O'Driscolls lurked nearby, Column's gang a shadow from the past. His feud with Dutch, born in '83 over a train job near Santa Fe, 3 dead on each side, a grudge that festered through the years. Kieran, their captive from a raid near Adler Ranch, shivered in a corner, his O'Driscoll brand a mark of mistrust. Bound and blindfolded, Kieran was subjected to intense interrogation. Desperate to save his own skin, he divulged the location of a nearby O'Driscoll camp, where Column was purportedly holed up. This intelligence presented Dutch with a strategic advantage, a chance to deliver a decisive blow to their foes. As dawn broke, casting a pale glow over the snow-covered landscape, Dutch assembled a posse comprising Arthur Morgan, John Marston, Bill Williamson, and the reluctant guide, Kieran. The journey to the O'Driscoll encampment was fraught with tension. The crunch of hooves on snow and the distant call of a lone wolf served as the only accompaniment to their grim procession. Upon reaching the outskirts of the camp, nestled within a dense forest clearing, Dutch signaled for a halt. Through the veil of snow-laden branches they observed the O'Driscolls, some huddled around a flickering fire, others tending to their weapons, oblivious to the impending assault. Dutch, ever the tactician, emphasized the element of surprise. He proposed a stealthy approach to thin the enemy's ranks before initiating An all-out attack. Arthur, with his proficiency in silent takedowns, was tasked with eliminating the sentries. Drawing his knife, he moved like a shadow among the trees, dispatching 2 O'Driscoll guards with swift, precise strikes. Their bodies crumpled silently into the snow, the pristine white now marred by crimson stains. With the sentries neutralized, Dutch gave the signal. The gang advanced, weapons at the ready. The tranquility of the morning was shattered by the deafening roar of gunfire. Bullets whizzed through the frigid air, finding their marks amidst cries of pain and alarm. The O'Driscolls, though caught off guard, scrambled to retaliate, their disarray evident. Arthur's sharpshooting skills came to the fore as he picked off adversaries with lethal accuracy. John and Bill flanked the camp, their rifles unleashing a relentless barrage. Amidst the chaos, Dutch's voice rang out, directing his men and sowing confusion among the enemy ranks. As the skirmish reached its zenith, Arthur made his way to the central cabin, where he believed Colum might be hiding. Kicking down the door, he was met not with the gang leader, but with a desperate O'Driscoll who lunged at him, knocking Arthur to the ground. The two grappled fiercely, the room's confined space amplifying the intensity of their struggle. Just as the assailant gained the upper hand, a gunshot echoed, and the O'Driscoll slumped lifelessly. Kieran stood at the threshold, pistol in hand, his face a mask of shock and resolve. Breathing heavily, Arthur pushed the body aside and rose to his feet. He regarded Kieran with a mixture of surprise and grudging respect. "Didn't expect that from you," Arthur muttered, dusting off his coat. Kieran swallowed hard, lowering the pistol. "Just didn't seem right, letting him kill you after you spared me." Outside, the gunfire had ceased. The O'Driscoll camp lay in ruins, its members either dead or fled. Dutch surveyed the scene, a satisfied gleam in his eye. "This is a good day," he proclaimed. "We've sent a clear message." Despite the victory, the absence of Colum O'Driscoll weighed heavily on the group. The elusive leader remained at large, a thorn in their side. Nevertheless, the raid bolstered the gang's morale, providing them with much-needed supplies and a renewed sense of purpose. As they gathered the spoils and prepared to return to Coulter, Dutch approached Kieran. "You've proven yourself today," Dutch acknowledged, "but trust is earned over time." Kieran nodded, understanding the weight of the unspoken words. "I'll do what it takes." After the Vanderlinde gang's successful assault on the O'Driscoll camp, the air was thick with the scent of gunpowder and the cold bite of the mountain wind. The fallen bodies of the O'Driscolls lay strewn across the snow, a testament to the gang's resolve and tactical prowess. With the immediate threat neutralized, Dutch Vanderlinde directed his men to scour the camp for any valuable supplies or intelligence that could aid their survival and future endeavors. As Arthur Morgan navigated through the remnants of the skirmish, his keen eyes caught sight of a modest cabin, slightly removed from the main encampment. The structure, weathered by time and the harsh elements, seemed unassuming at first glance. However, a subtle instinct urged Arthur to investigate further. Pushing open the creaking door, he was met with the musty scent of aged wood and the faint aroma of tobacco. The interior was dimly lit, with only slivers of light piercing through the cracks in the walls. Inside, Arthur's attention was immediately drawn to a sturdy wooden chest emblazoned with the inscription, Sampson Brothers Dynamite. The significance of this find was not lost on him. Explosives of this caliber could prove invaluable for the gang's operations. He carefully inspected the contents, ensuring the dynamite sticks were intact and viable. Satisfied with their condition, he made a mental note of their potential applications. Meanwhile, in another section of the camp, Micah Bell's relentless search bore fruit. Rummaging through a cluttered desk, he uncovered a set of meticulously detailed documents. Unfurling the papers, Micah's eyes gleamed with intrigue as he recognized the strategic value of the information before him. These documents outlined an elaborate plan to rob a train belonging to the affluent industrialist, Leviticus Cornwall. The plans detailed the train's schedule, security measures, and the substantial cargo it carried. Information that could potentially set the gang up for a significant windfall. Reassembling at the center of the camp, the gang members presented their findings to Dutch. The combination of high-grade explosives and the train robbery plans painted a tantalizing picture of opportunity. Dutch, ever the visionary, saw beyond the immediate gain. He recognized that executing such a heist could not only replenish their dwindling resources but also deliver a strategic blow to one of their adversaries. Gathering his men, Dutch addressed them with a renewed sense of purpose. Gentlemen, fate has handed us the keys to our next endeavor. With these explosives and the intelligence on Cornwall's train, we have the means to secure our future and send a message to those who would see us falter. The gang, galvanized by the prospect of a lucrative heist, began preparations in earnest. The harsh conditions of the Grizzlies seemed momentarily forgotten as they focused on the intricate planning required for the train robbery. Each member understood the stakes. Success could provide them with the resources needed to find a more permanent refuge, while failure could spell their demise. As the snow continued to fall gently around them, the Vanderlinde gang steeled themselves for the challenges ahead. The discovery of the explosives and the train robbery plans had reignited their hope, setting them on a path that would test their unity, cunning, and resolve in the face of an unforgiving world. The journey back was marked by a contemplative silence. The feud with the O'Driscolls was far from over, but for now the Vanderlinde gang had secured a hard-fought showdown. However, the world beyond Coulter pressed close. The Pinkertons' reach grew, their agents born from labor wars in Pittsburgh, now chasing outlaws with telegraph speed. The telegraph itself hummed in Blackwater, its wires buzzing with wanted posters, Dutch Vanderlinde and $1,000 dead or alive. The blizzard's toll was heavy. Cattle froze in the valleys. Trains stalled near Donner Falls, their whistles lost to the gale. Yet within Coulter's walls the gang clung to survival, their breath fogging in the dim light, their dreams battered but unbroken, as the snow piled high and the mountain stood sentinel over their fragile refuge. The snow thawed and the tail moved south with the Vanderlinde gang, their flight from Coulter leading them to Horseshoe Overlook, a perch in the heartlands of New Hanover. The land here rolled gentle and green, its hills dotted with wildflowers, prairie poppy and yarrow swaying under a sky wide and blue. The Dakota River wound through the valley, its waters glinting in the spring sun, its banks soft with clay where deer drank at dusk. Vanderlinde lay nearby, a livestock town born in the 70s from cattle drives, its auctions a chaos of mooing herds and shouting ranchers, its streets churned to mud after rains that swelled Oak Creek's run. The air carried the scent of grass and leather, the distant rumble of a waterfall near Cumberland Falls, a low hum beneath the breeze. The camp settled on a cliff's edge, tents pitched under oaks that cast dappled shade. Lanterns glowed at night, Javier's guitar strummed soft tunes of Sonora, and the clink of Pearson's coffee pot mingled with the chatter of a family reborn. Dutch preached renewal, his voice rising over the fire, but the law's shadow lingered, Pinkertons sniffed the trails, their wanted posters tacked in Vanderlinde's saloon. Arthur roamed the hills, fishing with Hosea along the Dakota's bends, the old man spinning tales of a con in 76 that saw him pose as a preacher in St. Louis, fleecing a congregation for $300. Jack played among the wagons, his laughter a fragile light, while Abigail mended shirts, her eyes on John, who sulked after Coulter's scars. The heartlands bore their own history, a land shaped by the tides of time and struggle, its rolling hills and golden plains stretching beneath a sky that had witnessed centuries of change. In the 1850s, settlers pushed west, their wagons creaking over trails once trodden by Cheyenne bands who'd hunted buffalo here since the days of their grandfathers' grandfathers. The herds thundered then, a sea of hide and horn, their numbers vast until the white man's rifles and railroads cut them down, leaving bones to bleach under the sun. By 99, the Cheyenne were shadows, confined to scraps of land near the Black Hills, their songs of the hunt fading into the wind. Now oil rumors bubbled beneath the heartland soil, black gold seeping near Flatneck Station, its scent a whisper on the breeze. Leviticus Cornwall's scouts roamed these fields, their eyes sharp with greed, their maps marking claims for rigs that would rise in years to come, a spark for fires that would burn long after the gang's tale ended. The gang's peace at Horseshoe Overlook was fleeting, a fragile interlude beneath the oaks and the murmur of the Dakota River. Dutch Vanderlinde, his mind ever restless, turned his gaze to a prize that gleamed in the distance, a train, the Leviticus Cornwall No. 3, a steel beast hauling payroll and bonds through the wilds of Big Valley. Cornwall was no mere man but a titan of the age, a name whispered in boardrooms from New York to San Francisco. Born in 42 to a Pennsylvania merchant, he'd built an empire on coal and timber in the 60s, then turned to railroads and oil as the West opened. His kerosene and tar company fueled lanterns across the nation. His trains, branded with his initials, carried the wealth of a growing America, their whistles a hymn to progress. To Dutch, he was the enemy, a symbol of the greed strangling the frontier, a man whose fortune could fund their escape to a freer shore. The job took root in whispers around the campfire, Dutch's voice low and fervent as he traced the plan on a scrap of paper singed at the edges. The train ran a route from Riggs Station, a dusty stop near the Little Creek River, up through Big Valley's pines to the trestle near Caliban's seat. a jagged outcrop overlooking cliffs where hawks circled in the dusk. Its cargo was no secret. $10,000 in gold bars and payroll cash locked in a reinforced car for Cornwall's workers at Ansburg's mines, a hall guarded by Pinkerton hires with Winchester rifles and orders to shoot. Hosea urged caution. Cornwall's reach stretched far, his vengeance a storm that had crushed smaller gangs like the Del Lobos in '91, their bodies left swinging from telegraph poles near Tumbleweed. But Dutch saw glory, a strike against the machine, and Micah Bell nodded, his grin sharp, eager for the chaos it promised. The setup unfolded over days, a quiet dance of preparation beneath the Heartland's vast sky. Arthur Morgan and John Marston scouted the tracks, riding through Big Valley under a moon half hidden by clouds, the air crisp with pine and the distant musk of elk grazing near Wynyard Strait. They found the spot, a curve near Caliban's seat where the train slowed, its wheels grinding against the incline, the trestle's shadow stretching long over the ravine below. Lenny Summers, sharp-eyed and quick, climbed the ridge with Arthur, sketching the guard posts, 2 at the front, 3 in the payroll car, 1 on the caboose, his pencil scratching as he recalled his father's lessons in patience, a legacy from a man who'd defied slavery's chains. John, restless since Coulter, tested the dynamite with Bill Williamson near Owanjilla Dam, the blast muffled by the lake's depths, its ripples fading under starlight. Bill, a soldier once court-martialed for blowing a sergeant's tent in '86, handled the fuses with a grunt, his hands steady despite the whiskey on his breath. Charles Smith crafted arrows in camp, his Blackfoot hands shaping ash wood, offering to silence the outer guards, his bow a whisper where guns would roar. Javier Escuella tuned his guitar by the fire, humming a tune from Chihuahua, but his knife gleamed ready, a blade that had spilled blood in Sonora years before. Hosea gathered word from Valentine. A drunk brakeman in the saloon spilled the train's schedule. Midnight, May 17th, its steam engine puffing north under a sky heavy with coming rain. Dutch drilled the plan, Arthur and John on the explosives, Bill and Lenny on horseback to flank, Charles and Javier to cut the telegraph lines near Tempest Rim, ensuring no call for help reached Blackwater's wires. The weight of Cornwall loomed. His Pinkertons had tracked the O'Driscolls after a heist in '95, leaving Colum's brother dead in a ditch near Emerald Ranch, a warning etched in bullet casings. The job struck at night, the air thick with tension, and the scent of damp earth after a drizzle kissed the pines. The gang rode out from Horseshoe Overlook, their horses' hooves a soft thud on the trail, past Twin Stack Pass, lanterns dim to shadows. Arthur and John crouched near the tracks, the dynamite cold in their hands, its fuses coiled like snakes. The train's whistle pierced the dark, 3 long blasts as it rounded the bend, its headlamp cutting through mist, rolling off Donner Falls. Bill and Lenny waited in the trees, their mounts snorting, reins tight, while Charles's arrow found a guard's throat near the trestle's edge, the man slumping silent into the brush. Javier's blade severed the telegraph wire, its snap lost to the wind howling through Big Valley's peaks. The blast came sudden and fierce. Dynamite roared, a thunderclap that shook the ground. The payroll car's side splitting open as the train screeched to a halt, its wheels sparking on twisted rails. Pines trembled, needles showering the earth, the echo rolling through cliffs where moonlight glinted off Caliban's seat. Gold spilled from the wreckage, bars stamped with Cornwall's crest, payroll bags bursting with greenbacks, its gleam a fortune in the lantern glow. Arthur hauled the sacks, his boots crunching on gravel, while John fired at Pinkertons, scrambling from the front car, their rifles flashing in the dark. Bill and Lenny rode in, whooping as they scooped coins, the horses rearing under the weight. The air filled with gun smoke and pine sap, the night alive with shouts and the clang of steel as a guard's body tumbled into the ravine, his scream swallowed by the falls below. The score was theirs, $10,000 in hand, a king's ransom for a gang of 20. But Cornwall's name lingered, a titan of rail and oil whose wrath would follow like a storm on the horizon. The Pinkertons rallied, their shots wild as the gang retreated, hooves pounding back to Horseshoe Overlook under a sky streaked with dawn. Dutch laughed by the fire, gold bars stacked high, his voice ringing with triumph. But Hosea's eyes narrowed, knowing Cornwall's reach, his trains fed armies, his oil-lit cities, his loss a wound to pride and profit. Word spread fast. Wanted posters doubled in Valentine by week's end, $2,000 on Dutch, $1,000 on Arthur. Pinkertons sniffing trails near Emerald Ranch. The Heartland's oil fields would burn hotter for it, Cornwall's rigs a vow of vengeance, the gang's fleeting peace shattered by the weight of a name that would chase them to the end. The days following the train heist, when the Vanderlinde gang sought shelter near Valentine, a modest town nestled in the heartlands of New Hanover, its muddy lanes and weathered barns a fleeting promise of peace. The Leviticus Cornwall No. 3 lay derailed near Caliban's seat, its oil cars plundered in the night, the gang's coffers heavier by a resale haul that gleamed in the firelight at Horseshoe Overlook, though the shadow of their deed stretched far beyond the ridge. Late spring warmed the air, the scent of wildflowers, prairie rose and bitterweed, blending with the tang of leather and sweat as the gang pitched their tents beneath sprawling oaks, the Dakota River's silver curves glinting below. Crickets sang in the dusk their chorus, woven with the murmur of voices and the clink of tin cups, the world unfurling wide and green beneath a sky painted with the fading hues of day. Valentine stood a short ride north, a livestock town forged in the 1870s from cattle drives that once rolled up from Texas, its wooden storefronts weathered by rain and time. The saloon glowed with lantern light, its air thick with tobacco smoke and the drone of ranchers slurring tales of lost herds, while the stockyards hummed with the lowing of steers, their hides branded with the marks of a vanishing frontier. The heartlands bore a deeper past. Cheyenne hunters had roamed these plains centuries ago, their arrows felling buffalo until settlers arrived in the 50s, their plows and fences driving the tribes north to the Black Hills. Now oil seeped beneath the soil near Flatneck Station, a whisper of wealth that drew scouts from Leviticus Cornwall's empire, their greed a thread that wove through the gang's fate. Dutch called for respite, his voice steady as he stood by the fire, promising the gang a moment to gather strength before the next grand stroke. The train's takings provided a tidy sum, enough to stave off want, but Cornwall's wrath loomed, a titan of rail and oil whose reach spanned the nation. Dutch spoke of one more heist, a final score to secure their freedom, his eyes alight with dreams of a haven beyond the law. Perhaps California's golden valleys, perhaps Tahiti's mango groves, a vision sparked years back in a Dakota saloon. The camp slipped into an uneasy rhythm, tents dotting the ridge, the air soft with Javier Escuela's guitar and the clatter of Pearson's stew pot, spiced with tales of naval storms off Panama. Yet beneath the calm tension simmered, Dutch's plans grew vague, his gaze distant, and Arthur bore the weight of it, a loyal son watching his father fray. Arthur poured himself into the gang's survival, his hands steady as he rode out to keep the camp alive. He hunted in Big Valley, the air sharp with pine as he tracked elk near Wynyard Strait, their antlers catching dawn's mist, his bow drawn silent in the way Charles Smith had shown him. The meat stacked high, venison and rabbit, its smoke curling from the fire, a lifeline for a family stretched thin. He fished with Hosea along the Dakota's banks, the old man's line snagging trout as he spun yarns of a 76 con in Saint. Louis posing as a preacher to fleece a flock for $300. In Valentine, Arthur bartered pelts with the butcher, a grizzled man muttering of Pinkerton shadows, his boots sinking in mud as whispers of wanted posters, Dutch at $2,000, Arthur at $1,000. This didn't stop Arthur and Lenny Form enjoying the local saloon in whiskey-fueled nights. Their laughter and conversation fluttered through the doors and out into the night beyond. Cornwall's vengeance took shape in the Pinkerton Detective Agency, a force forged in Chicago's labor wars of the 70s, its agents hardened by blood and steel. Led by Agent Andrew Milton, a man of cold eyes and colder resolve, they swept into the heartlands, their badges glinting in Valentine's saloon as they pressed drunks and ranchers for leads. Milton's dossier on Dutch swelled, robberies from Kansas to Colorado, a decade of defiance against a world he scorned. The Pinkertons trailed the gang's dust, their horses snorting near Emerald Ranch, their questions sowing mistrust. Strangers met drawn guns. Bill Williamson's temper flared at a peddler near Twin Stack Pass, Susan Grimshaw's voice sharp as she guarded the wagons, and the gang turned inward, their vigilance a shield against a tightening snare. Dutch's restlessness mounted, his refrain of one more job echoing by the fire, his hands tracing maps of banks and trains, his mind a storm of half-formed dreams. Arthur watched, his loyalty strained. Dutch's choices felt reckless now, his trust in men like Micah Bell a crack in the foundation. Micah had joined in '98, pulled from a Nevada shack after killing two in a bar brawl, his grin too wide, his words too slick. He strutted through camp, revolvers gleaming, urging Dutch toward bolder strikes, a serpent where Hosea's wisdom once held sway. Arthur's doubts deepened. He saw Micah's chaos in Dutch's eyes, a shift from the philosopher who'd raised him to a man chasing shadows. Trouble struck when Micah rode to Strawberry, a logging town west of Big Valley, its air thick with sap and sawdust. On June 8th, he swaggered into the saloon, his temper flaring over a card game. Two locals dead, their blood staining the floor. Micah jailed in the town's brick cell. Word reached camp via a rider, and Arthur rode out, the night dark with clouds, his horse pounding through pines near Owangila Dam. Strawberry buzzed with deputies, their lanterns casting shadows as Arthur crept to the jail, his revolver barking through the bars. Micah's guard fell, the keys snatched, the cell door swinging wide. Micah laughed, his gratitude thin, and they fled, bullets whizzing from lawmen's Winchesters, the air sharp with gun smoke and damp earth as they cut back to the ridge. Debt collection darkened Arthur's days, a task pressed by Leopold Strauss, the gang's usurer, his ledger, a grim tally of desperation. Arthur rode to Thomas Downes's farm near Valentine, a shack sagging under debt, $20 owed, a pittance turned cruel. Downes, frail and coughing, pleaded through sunken cheeks, his wife trembling behind. But Strauss's orders held firm. Arthur loomed, his voice low, demanding coin. Downes coughed again, a spray of blood flecking Arthur's face, his hand shaking as he pried dollars from a tin. The air hung heavy with dust and guilt, Arthur's chest tightening, not just rage, but unease, a flicker of shame at the man he'd become. Days later, a cough began, faint but persistent, a shadow from Downes's sickness seeping into his lungs, its weight unspoken as he rode back, the heartlands green fading to gray in his eyes. The Pinkertons closed in. Milton cornered Arthur near Cumberland Falls. The water's roar drowning camp echoes. Milton's voice sliced through, offering amnesty for betrayal. Turn on Dutch, name the gang, walk free. His file knew Arthur's past, son of a hanged thief, raised by outlaws, but Arthur spat in the dirt, his loyalty a rock unmoved. A Milton's threat lingered, a vow of fire, and the gang pushed on, their luck a thread worn thin. Dutch eyed Valentine's bank, a brick vault swollen with ranchers' cash, $20,000 or more, a score to end scores. The plan struck on June 15th noon under a sky heavy with rain, Arthur and Bill on dynamite, Hosea and Lenny on the vault, John and Javier on lookout, Dutch at the helm. The robbery tore Valentine asunder, dynamite ripped the bank's wall, gold spilled like rivers, but deputies swarmed, their badges glinting in the mud. A shootout blazed, bullets shattered saloon glass, lawmen fell in the street, their blood pooling with rainwater near Smithfield's porch. Hosea's horse reared, his shouts lost as lead flew. Lenny's rifle barked from a rooftop, his aim true until a slug grazed his arm. The air thickened with gun smoke and screams, townsfolk fleeing as the gang carved through, their haul heavy in sacks, $18,000, a fortune stained red. 7 deputies lay dead, their hats scattered in the dirt, and Valentine burned with fury, its church bell tolling a dirge as the gang fled south, hooves thundering past Citadel Rock. The law's net tightened, Pinkertons flooded the trails, Milton's voice a vow in Valentine's telegraph office, their wanted sums soaring, Dutch at $5,000, Arthur at $2,500. The gang abandoned Horseshoe Overlook, tents struck under dusk's cover, the Dakota River a silver farewell as they rode east to Clemens Point, a spit by Flatiron Lake. The air turned humid, cicadas droning through cypress groves, the camp a flicker of lanterns in the swamp's embrace. Dutch preached defiance by the water, his dream intact but fraying, while Arthur's cough deepened, a rattle from Downes's blood, a shadow of doubt as he stared at the stars, the weight of loyalty and loss settling heavy in his bones. The tale turns now to the gang's flight south from Valentine's chaos, their path veering east to Clemens Point, a narrow spit of land thrusting into Flatiron Lake, its waters lapping soft against sandy shores fringed with reeds. The air draped thick and humid, a late spring shroud stitched with the drone of cicadas echoing through cypress groves, their twisted limbs cloaked in Spanish moss, swaying in breezes off Lemoyne swamps. The camp took root here after the bank's bloodied gold, $18,000 wrested from Valentine's vault, left a wake of dead deputies and Pinkerton whispers. Lanterns flickered beneath the trees, spilling golden pools on damp earth, while egrets stalked the shallows, their white plumes stark against the lake's glassy sheen. The scent of mud and magnolia drifted, a fleeting balm over a band worn thin by flight. North of Clements Point lay Rhodes, a faded planter's town in scarlet meadows, its red dirt streets dozing beneath ancient oaks, their branches sagging with the burden of a broken past. Rhodes bore the scars of a lost age, founded in the 1700s as a trading post along the Lanahatchee River. It swelled with cotton and tobacco in the antebellum days, its riches carved from enslaved labor. By 1899, its luster had faded, its clapboard storefronts peeling, its saloon a murmur of old men nursing whiskey and memories. Two families reigned over this land, the Grays and the Braithwaites, rival clans whose feud ignited in '61 when the Civil War's tumult split their kin over a hoard of Confederate gold. The Grays, Scots-Irish settlers turned tobacco barons, held Calumet Ravine, their plantation a sprawl of fields and barns, their sheriff's badge a hold on Rhodes's law. The Braithwaites, English gentry tracing back to Virginia stock, ruled from a mansion of chip paint and cracked marble, their wealth reborn in moonshine barrels stashed in the bayou. Rumors curled through Rhodes' dusty air. Gold, they whispered, buried by one or both, a treasure lost to spite and time. Dutch caught the scent of opportunity in this divide, his eyes burning with the dream of a score to end all scores, a fortune to secure their liberty, to retire to lands beyond the law's grasp. The train's bonds and Valentine's gold had fattened their purse, but not enough for his vision of Tahiti or California, a refrain he'd chanted since '95 over a Dakota campfire. Hosea stood at his side, his oldest friend and steadiest voice, a man whose silver hair masked a mind honed sharp. Born in the 40s to a frontier preacher, Hosea had roamed as a conman after his wife Bessie's death, perfecting a wit that once fleeced a St. Louis flock for $300 in '76. Together, they spun a plan to stoke the Grays and Braithwaites against each other, fanning their feud until it blazed, then slipping off with the gold when the ashes cooled. The camp hummed with their plotting. Dutch's voice swelled over the fire, vowing a future unbound, while Hosea's softer tones charted the steps, a chessboard laid in the swamp's haze. Arthur rode into the fray, his boots stained red with Rhodes' dirt as he worked both sides. He met Lee Gray, the sheriff, a man of bluff charm and tobacco-stained teeth, at Calumet Ravine, the air tart with curing leaves and horse sweat. Arthur took a deputy's badge, a ploy to guard Gray's wagons, moonshine pilfered from Braithwaite stills, his revolver cracking at raiders near Ringneck Creek, the water shimmering under noon's glare. With Hosea he rode to Braithwaite Manor, its columns buckling under vines, its halls resounding with Catherine Braithwaite's icy drawl. They posed as buyers, inspecting barrels of Shine in the cellar, the damp air heavy with corn mash and decay, their smiles veiling the scheme. Sean and Bill torched Braithwaite fields under a moonless sky, flames licking cotton and cane, the crackle swallowed by cicadas as the night flared red, a spark to fuel the feud. The gambit seemed to take, tensions climbed like swamp mist, the Greys arming their barns, the Braithwaites fortifying their gates. Dutch and Arthur wore deputy stars, riding with Grey to herd cattle near painted sky. The herd's dust a haze over red earth, their laughter a mask for the gold they chased. Hosea wove tales for Catherine, promising markets for her liquor, his charm a strand in the web. The camp at Clemens Point shimmered under misty dawns, the lake's calm pierced by fish leaping near the dock, Javier's guitar threading melodies of Sonora through the humid air. Yet whispers of gold stayed elusive. Old-timers in Rhodes Saloon spoke of a chest buried near Bolger Glade, a battlefield littered with Confederate ghosts, but no map emerged, no vault shone. The ruse deepened and fate struck hard. The Greys set an ambush in Rhodes on June 22nd. A trap sprung in the town's core. Sean fell. A bullet through his skull. His Irish bravado stilled mid-laugh as he rode with Arthur, Dutch, and Micah to parley. The air burst with lead. Grey's men firing from the saloon and gunsmith's roof. Their betrayal a knife in Dutch's trust. Sean's body dropped in the street. His father's IRA tales, a legacy from a man shot by British troops in '67, entombed with him, the red dirt soaking his blood. Arthur fired back his revolver a roar, Micah's guns blazing wild, the trio cutting through as Grey's deputies fled, their sheriff wounded but breathing. The Greys' deceit unraveled, gold a myth, their play a bid to smash Dutch's band. In the tumult, Jack vanished, snatched by Catherine Braithwaite's command, her vengeance a claw around John's son. Dutch raged, his plan shattered, his voice a bellow by the lake as he swore reckoning. Arthur and John stormed Braithwaite Manor, guns thundering through marble halls and past snarling hounds, the air dense with powder and cries. Catherine stood unbowed, her gray hair wild as the gang razed her fields. Her sons fell in the fray, Gertrude, her mad daughter, locked in an outhouse, her wails a haunting echo. Jack was gone, spirited to St. Denis by Catherine's pact with Angelo Bronte, a crime lord whose shadow loomed from the city's docks. The matriarch perished with her mansion, a corpse in the ashes, her gold, a fable lost to fire. But Jack's absence gnawed, a wound in the gang soul. The Greys crumbled in Rhodes. Lee Grey shot in a second clash near the saloon, his family's lies laid bare as Arthur and Hosea rode through, their badges cast in the dust. Clemens Point glowed under dawn's mist, egrets pacing the shallows, but tension simmered. Josiah Trelawney, a dandy conman who'd joined in '94 after a magic scam, fleeced a New York crowd, slipped in with word. Bronte held Jack in St. Denis, his mansion a fortress of silk and steel. Molly sulked in her tent, her love a ghost unreturned, her voice shrill with despair as Dutch's gaze drifted. Arthur's cough worsened, a rattle from Downes's blood, his unease a shadow as he cleaned his guns by the lake, the weight of their losses heavy in his chest. The world drew near. Sharecroppers labored in Lemoyne's fields, their cabins bowing under debt, their songs a dirge for a South unhealed. Swamp legends murmured of ghosts in the bayou near La Grace, their cries lost to the drone of frogs and the snap of alligator jaws. Leviticus Cornwall's trains rolled north, his oil rigs rising near Annesburg, a coal town choking on soot, its miners bent under loads that broke lungs. The gangs danced with Rhodes' left marks, Pinkertons circled, Milton's agents pressing drunks in Valentine, their telegrams humming with bounties. Dutch at $5,000, Arthur at $2,500. Dutch's dreams of freedom warped, his voice cutting, his eyes darting to shadows on the lake's still waters, his thoughtfulness waning as Micah's whisper swelled. Gold a mirage the gang betrayed, their unity fraying. The Pinkertons' grip tightened. Milton's men raided near Caliga Hall, their boots splashing through swamp mud, forcing the gang to strike camp. They moved north toward St. Denis, settling at Shady Bell, an old plantation house rotting in the bayou's embrace, its columns cracked, its air thick with mildew and mosquito hum. Dutch paced its porch, plotting Jack's rescue, his strategy a flicker of the man he'd been. While Arthur stared at the moss-draped oaks, the humid night pressing close, Sean's death and Jack's loss a burden, as the gang drifted toward a city that would test them all. The tale drifts now to St. Denis, a city of brick and smoke perched on the banks of the Lanahatchee River, where the gang's fortunes twisted amid the clamor of industry and the sting of treachery. Their flight from Clemens Point carried them north, a Pinkerton raid near Caliga Hall, driving them to Shady Bell, an old plantation house crumbling in Lemoyne swamps. Its columns sagged under rot's weight, its air thick with mildew and the ceaseless hum of mosquitoes, a humid veil pierced by the throaty croaks of bullfrogs. Spanish moss draped the oaks, swaying in the damp breeze while fireflies flickered over still waters, their glow a faint whisper of life beyond the decay. Alligator growls rumbled in the night, a primal echo of the wild pressing against the city's edge. The camp settled here, lanterns casting frail light on warped boards, the scent of swamp mud and cypress, a heavy curtain over a band teetering on the brink. St. Denis loomed west, its gas lamps slicing through the fog, a sprawling web of cobblestone streets and trolley tracks unfurling beneath a sky smudged with factory soot. The city bore a French lineage founded in the 1730s as a trading post by trappers and Jesuits, its name a faded nod to a Saint Few, now revered. By 1899 it stood as a bastion of progress, its docks thrumming with steamboats hauling sugar from Caliga Hall's fields, steel from northern foundries, and cotton bound for Europe's looms. Smokestacks belched black plumes, their shadows falling over factories where immigrant hands toiled, Irish fleeing famine's grasp, Italians escaping barren fields, Poles driven by war's echoes, their voices a babel beneath the clank of machinery. Mansions gleamed along the lakefront, their marble facades raised by coal barons and shipping lords, while tenements slumped in the slums, laundry strung like tattered flags. The streets pulsed, dock workers heaved crates near the wharf, sweat mingling with fish stink. Vendors hawked oysters and bread by Bastille's saloon, their cries sharp in the haze. Children darted past trolleys, their laughter swallowed by the rumble of wheels. The air hung thick with coal dust and chimney ash, a city thriving on the Old South's bones, yet trembling under its own excess. Angelo Bronte ruled its underbelly, a Sicilian who'd landed in '80, his empire forged from extortion, smuggled rum, and a stranglehold on the police. His mansion sprawled on the lakefront, a marble fortress of arched windows and iron gates, its halls rich with cigar smoke and the clink of crystal, a king's lair draped in silk and menace. He'd seized Jack from Catherine Braithwaite's clutches, a pawn in a game Dutch barely fathomed. Dutch rode to confront him, his charm a mask over fury, meeting Bronte in the mansion's courtyard under dusk's veil. Jack stood there, small and unharmed, his eyes bright. He'd thrived with Papa Bronte, tales of sweets and stories, a strange solace in captivity. The exchange came calm. Dutch bartered peace, words smooth as riverstone, and Bronte relented, his grin edged, handing Jack over with a tip slipped like venom. The trolley station on Canal Street hid a fortune he claimed, cash stashed in its office, ripe for the taking. Dutch swallowed it whole, Jack safe, but a seed of ruin planted. Bronte's laugh a specter as they returned to Shady Belle. The camp simmered with unease, the swamp's humidity a cloak over their respite. Arthur's cough sharpened, a rasp born months back from Thomas Downes's blood, a debt job near Valentine that stained his lungs. Each breath grated now, a shadow of sickness he muffled with a scarf, his unease a quiet pang as he cleaned his guns by the dock, fireflies blurring through weary eyes. The Pinkertons hounded their trail. Andrew Milton's men raided the docks, their boots pounding as steamboats wailed while the coffers stagnated, Valentine's gold thinning fast. Then the O'Driscolls struck, a vengeful swarm ferreting out Shady Belle from a snitch in Rhodes. They hit at dawn, July 5th, rifles cracked from the swamp, bullets shredding canvas as Dutch rallied the gang. Arthur fired from the porch, his cough choking through gun smoke. Sadie slashed with her knife, a widow's fury. Charles held the flank, his bow silent but true. The clash bled short. O'Driscolls fled, 6 dead in the mud, but the camp's peace shattered. Dutch's patience a frayed cord. Dutch grew desperate, his mind a tempest, reckless, impatient, the trolley tip a flare in his drift. Hosea protested, his voice low by the fire. This wasn't the plan, a trap loomed. But Dutch's eyes burned, his Tahiti fantasy a fevered hymn sown in '95 over Pacific whispers. Micah fanned it, his grin a spur, while Arthur, loyal still, rode with Dutch on July 8th, the trolley job a blur of haste. The station stood quiet on Canal Street, its bricks warm under noon's heat. Arthur, Dutch, and Lenny breached it, the air sharp with coal dust. But Bronte's promise crumbled. No cash hid there, just ledgers and a snare. Local law swarmed, blue coats with carbines primed by Bronte's hand. Bullets clattered off bricks. The trolley derailed in a screech of metal as they fled. Dutch raged, livid at the betrayal, his fist slamming Shady Belle's table, the swamp's drone a jeer to his wrath. Hosea's pleas fell deaf. Dutch turned on Bronte, vowing his end. Then the Bank of St. Denis, a city vault swollen with $150,000 in cash and Cornwall's railroad bonds. Arthur balked, his cough a plow beside Hosea's reason. A bank this guarded spelled doom. But Dutch plunged unhinged. The strike on Bronte hit July 15th, a moonless night. Arthur and John stormed the mansion, knives silent through guards, the scent of magnolias heavy. Bronte stood in his study, silk-clad and smug, but Dutch's rage snapped. He seized him, hands a vice, drowning him in the lake as John and Arthur watched, stunned by the brutality, pleas gurgling to silence. The victory soured, Pinkertons loomed, Bronte's death a beacon, and Dutch, heedless, pressed the bank, his anarchist roots from Paine's pages a roar against order. The heist wove frantic. Hosea mapped guards, 6 in the lobby, 2 at the vault, 4 on patrol, his notes frail by lantern light. Arthur scouted rooftops near the saloon, soot thick in his lungs. John and Bill rigged dynamite by Sisika Road, fuses coiled in dusk. Dutch drilled them, Charles on lookout, Javier and Lenny on the vault. Micah, a prod to act. It struck July 20th noon under summer's weight, trolley bells a faint chime. Dynamite roared, the bank's wall splitting, glass shattering as cash spilled. Javier breached the vault, bonds stuffed in sacks, the air sharp with fear. Guards fired, Arthur's revolver a thunderclap, but Pinkertons swarmed. Milton's trap primed since roads dozens strong, carbines slashing streets. Hosea fell, a bullet through his chest, blood pooling as Dutch screamed, his moral compass dimming mid-breath. Lenny dropped, shot on the roof, his Douglas book tumbling, a boy of 19 stilled. John was nabbed, hauled to Sisika, his cries lost. The gang fled, a brutal ruin, $80,000 snatched, half lost, their unity shredded. Milton's voice vowed from the shadows, Bronte's tip, a noose with Cornwall's gold. Mayor Henri Lemieux raged, his city's calm buried. Arthur led the retreat, his cough choking through smoke. Dutch, Micah, Charles, Javier, Bill, and Sadie trailing. The streets a maze of cordons and shouts. They slipped into a crumbling warehouse near the docks. A derelict shell of sagging beams and shattered windows, its air thick with mold and the tang of spilled molasses. Pinkertons scoured the city, their lanterns glinting through fog, bluecoats patrolling cobblestones as the gang hunkered low. The day stretched taut. Arthur slumped by a crate, his cough a rasp. The $80,000 sacks a frail shield. Dutch ranted soft, rats in every shadow, Micah nodding as Javier bound his arm, blood seeping from a graze. Charles watched the street, his bow strung. Bill cursed the heat, the warehouse a crypt, as flies buzzed. Night fell, July 20th, the fog thickening, gas lamps dimming to ghosts. Dutch seized the moment. A smuggler's ship waited near Caliga Hall, its hold reeking of fish and rum, chartered days back as a lifeline. They crept out, lanterns doused, boots soft on wet stone, the docks a shadow as Pinkerton shouts faded. The boat rocked on the Lanahetche's mouth, sails catching a faint breeze. The gang halved. Hosea gone, Lenny dead, John caged, slipping from St. Denis under cover of dark. Cuba a whispered horizon. Arthur slumped on deck, his cough a jagged echo, the city's smoke a fading scar as Shady Bell vanished, their dream a wreck adrift in the humid night. The tale turns now to the gang's desperate flight from St. Denis, a frantic exodus across the sea that carried them south on waves of hope and ruin. The bank heist's collapse. Hosea and Lenny felled by Pinkerton bullets. John seized for Sisika's cells, and $80,000 clutched in blood-stained sacks had spurred Dutch to a smuggler's ship near Caliga Hall. On July 12th, they sailed from the Lanahetche's mouth, the schooner's hold stinking of fish and rum, its patched sails catching a storm's wind as Pinkerton gunfire faded behind the horizon. St. Denis's smoke dwindled to a memory, and the gang stood on deck, Arthur, Dutch, Micah, Charles, Javier, Bill, their faces etched with loss. The tropic night a humid shroud over a band halved by fate. Dutch paced the deck, his boots thudding on salt-crusted planks, his voice rising over the wind's howl as he unveiled his plan. The storm lashed the sails, rain pelting the sea, but his eyes gleamed with a fevered light. Freedom, he vowed, lay south in Cuba, a land of sun and gold beyond America's grasp. The $80,000 would buy a foothold. Rum runners near Santiago de Cuba, he claimed, owed him favors from a deal struck years back in '94, a whispered pact forged over cigars in a New Orleans dive. They'd trade the cash for a plantation, a crumbling hacienda where sugarcane fields hid profits in barrels, a base to rebuild. From there, a bigger score, a Spanish bank flush with war reparations, would fund the dream. Tahiti, a paradise of mango groves and peace, a refuge from the Pinkertons' noose. The gang listened, rain stinging their skin. Micah grinned, his revolvers dripping. Charles stood silent, his bow lashed tight. Javier shivered, his guitar stowed below. But doubt gnawed at Arthur, his cough a rasp beneath the storm's roar. Hosea's absence a void Dutch's words couldn't fill. The sea turned cruel, its waves a churn of gray and foam, the storm a beast that struck past midnight. Lightning split the sky, thunder rolling as the schooner groaned. Timbers cracked, the mast splintered, and water surged over the deck. Dutch shouted orders, his voice lost to the gale, as Bill wrestled ropes, his curses drowned. Arthur gripped a crate, his lungs burning, the cough tearing through as a wave smashed him down, the world a blur of salt and black. The ship buckled, a final crack, wood shattering, and darkness took them, the sea a grave swallowing their flight. Dawn broke harsh and golden, the air thick with salt, and the cries of gulls overhead. Arthur awoke on a jagged shore, the boat a ruin strewn across coral rocks. Planks splintered, canvas torn, the hull a broken shell kissed by waves. His cough hacked through cracked lips, his body bruised as he staggered up, sand gritty beneath his boots, the tropic sun a hammer on his skull. The beach stretched wild, palms swayed in the breeze, their fronds rustling over a tangle of vines and driftwood. Crabs scuttled near tide pools, their claws ticking on stone. Cuba's coast loomed, the Sierra Maestra mountains a green haze to the west, but no town gleamed. Just a wilderness born of war's scars, the Spanish-American clash of '98, leaving its mark in burned cane and silence. He found the gang scattered along the shore. Charles knelt by a tide pool, his arm gashed but steady as he bound it with kelp. Javier limped from the surf, his coat torn, his knife clutched tight. Dutch emerged from the trees, his hair wild, his voice sharp as he rallied them. Micah at his side, grinning through a bruised jaw, Bill cursing the sand in his boots. The $80,000 was gone, sacks sunk or swept away, a fortune lost to the deep, leaving them with rifles, a few sodden dollars, and the clothes on their backs. Dutch preached defiance, his plan a ghost. Find locals, he urged, trade labor for aid, rebuild from the wreck. Arthur's cough punctuated the words, his doubt a shadow as he scanned the jungle, the gang a fractured band beneath the tropic glare. Their refuge turned to chains. Cuban soldiers swept the beach by noon, their pale blue uniforms patched from '98, their Mausers leveled under orders from Capitan Jose Estrada, a lean officer with a scarred cheek and a victor's sneer. The war had ended Spanish rule, but American oversight bred patrols, and shipwrecks drew scavengers and law alike. The gang fought, Arthur's revolver barked, felling 2 in the sand, but numbers won, the troops' bayonets glinting as they bound the gang in ropes. They marched inland, the air thick with humidity and the buzz of flies, through cane fields near El Cobre, stumps blackened from war, workers staring with hollow eyes, toward a stockade of adobe and wire, its walls a relic of colonial garrisons. The camp was an oven, cells of cracked clay, the air stale with sweat and mildew, the clank of chains a steady dirge. Arthur coughed through the bars, his lungs a furnace, each breath a stab, as he leaned on the wall, the tropic heat a weight on his bones. Dutch paced his cage, his voice a low chant. Escape, he vowed, away back to the sea, while Micah smirked, picking at his bonds. Charles carved notches in the dirt, his calm a lifeline. Javier sang soft, a tune of Sonora to dull the guards, his wound seeping through rags, days blurred, rations of bread and water, the drone of mosquitoes a torment. But Charles spied a chance. A guard, Pablo Ruiz, young and greedy, his eyes on Javier's knife. A bribe whispered in broken Spanish. The escape struck at dusk, August 1st, the sky a bruise of purple and gold. Javier slipped Ruiz the blade, the guards greed a key, chains clattered free, the stockade's gate creaked open, and Arthur's fist felled Ruiz in the dust. They ran, guns snatched from a rack, boots pounding through cane as shots cracked behind, Estreda's shouts a fading curse. The jungle swallowed them, vines slapping their faces, the air thick with earth and rot. Charles guiding through trails to the coast. They found a fishing boat near Playa Siboney, its hull weathered but whole, oars stashed beneath a tarp. Dutch climbed aboard, his plan reborn. North to America, he declared, the Pinkertons a foe to outrun, a new score to chase, the $80,000 a lesson in resilience. The boat rocked on August 3rd, sails patched with canvas scraps, the sea a mirror under dawn's glow. Dutch stood at the prow, his voice steady over the waves. Back to the States, he vowed, a bank in New Hanover or a train in Ambarino, money to bury Cuba's ghosts. Tahiti lingered, a dream he clung to, his eyes tracing the horizon as Micah nodded, his grin a spark. Arthur slumped by the stern, his cough a death knell, the tropic sun a memory as salt spray stung his face, the gang a shadow of itself, Hosea's wisdom lost, John's fate a chain, their unity a wreck adrift. The shore faded, Cuba's green a blur, the boat a fragile thread carrying them home. Dutch's plan a flicker in the wind. They staggered back to Shady Bell, the old plantation house a faltering haven in Lemoyne swamps, its columns sagging under rot's weight, its air thick with mildew and the relentless drone of mosquitoes. Spanish moss cloaked the oaks, swaying in the humid breeze while fireflies danced over still waters, their glow a faint pulse amid the decay. Alligator growls rumbled in the night, a wild echo from the bayou beyond, as lanterns cast frail light on warped boards, the scent of swamp mud and cypress, a stifling shroud over a band teetering on the edge. Their unity frayed in the dim haze. Dutch ranted by the fire pit, his voice a gale against the government, a machine fueled by banks, his anarchist roots from Thomas Paine's pages, surging in the humid dark. Micah stoked his paranoia, murmuring of rats in every shadow, his grin a sharp blade as he prodded Dutch's drift. Arthur mourned in silence, his cough deepening. A jagged rasp born months back from Thomas Downes's blood, a debt job near Valentine that seeped into his lungs, his unease a quiet weight as he sat by the dock, fireflies blurring through tired eyes, Reverend Swanson slurred hymns near the swamp's brim. A preacher, fallen to morphine after his flock abandoned him in '90, his tattered Bible gripped like a relic. Pearson spun tales of naval storms off Panama, his stew simmering as flies buzzed, a faint comfort lost to the camp's discord. Molly wailed betrayal, her Irish lilt piercing. She told no one of the bank, she swore, but Dutch turned cold. Her gentry passed a wraith between them, her pleas fading into the still waters. They'd hunkered near St. Denis, the city's smoke a distant smudge, hoping the swamp's grasp would shield them from the law's reach. But peace shattered fast. On July 25th, the Pinkertons struck, a fierce assault splintering the dawn. Milton's men surged from the bayou, dozens deep, their carbines barking as bullets tore through canvas and splintered wood. Dutch rallied the gang, his shout a thunderclap. Arthur fired from the porch, his cough choking through gun smoke. Sadie slashed with her knife, her widow's wrath a blade. Charles held the flank, his bow silent but deadly. The air thickened with powder and cries. Javier's revolver snapped, Bill's shotgun roared, but the tide overwhelmed. 3 fell, lesser hands, their names lost to the mud. As the gang fled north, wagons groaning under haste, Shady Bell, a smoldering ruin in their wake, the swamp's mist, a fleeting veil. They climbed to the mountains of Ambarino, a rugged camp near the mining town of Ansburg, its peaks cloaked in pine and frost, the air sharp with coal dust and the bite of iron. Ansburg sprawled below, a grim scar on the Roanoke Ridge, its streets choked with soot, its miners bowed under loads that broke lungs and spirits. Born in the 1870s from coal seams and greed, it thrived under Leviticus Cornwall's hand. His oil rigs churned near the Lanahatchee, his trains hauled black wealth south, his fortune a hammer to crush the gang. The camp clung to a cliff's edge, tents pitched beneath wind-twisted trees, the distant clang of picks a mournful chant over the valley. The world pressed near. Labor strikes shook St. Denis, workers bloodied by Pinkerton clubs. Ansburg's coal dust darkened the air, miners coughing echoes of Arthur's own. Alligators snapped in the bayou far below, their eyes aglint in memory's glow. Sadie burned with vengeance, her husband's death a forge that tempered her into an outlaw's steel. She sought Arthur and Dutch in a saloon on August 3rd, her eyes ablaze, vowing to end the O'Driscolls who'd haunted them since Column's feud flared in '83. Arthur, his cough a rasp, struck a pact, her aid for John's freedom sealed in the mountain chill. As they rode to St. Denis on August 5th, where Colum O'Driscoll faced the gallows, captured weeks back by Milton's men, his neck set for the noose in a public square near Bastille Saloon. The O'Driscolls swarmed to free him, 10 riders, rifles glinting in dawn's haze, but Dutch, Arthur, and Sadie struck. Dutcha and Arthur's rifles cracked from a rooftop, felling 3 in the dust. Sadie's rifle barked from an alley, her shots a widow's dirge as Column's kin fell. The crowd scattered, the rope tightened, Colum dangled, his empire choked, his last glare a curse as Arthur coughed through smoke. Sadie's nod, a vow kept. Arthur and Sadie rode next to Hanging Dog Ranch on August 7th, a den near Beaver Hollow, the air taut with pine and menace. 20 O'Driscolls waited. Arthur's rifle felled 5, his lungs searing, Sadie's knife slashed throats, her screams cutting dusk as the ranch burned, bodies strewn in ash. column's remnant shattered, Sadie's fire stilled, her pact firm as they returned. The frost-kissed peaks, a witness, the bank's echoes lingered. Cornwall raged, his rigs pumping fiercer, his trains a vow to bury them, while Dutch's dream twisted, his eyes wild as he stared at Roanoke's heights, the cracks in his family splitting under loss and guile. Fate struck hard. On August 10th, Arthur collapsed, his cough a violent wrench as he hauled wood near camp, the world fading to black beneath the pines. Charles dragged him to Annesburg to Dr. Elias Barnes, a gaunt figure in a soot-stained coat, his shack a creak of boards and bitter herbs. The verdict fell cold. Tuberculosis, seated by Downs, a death knell creeping swift, hastened by the outlaw's grind. Barnes's voice rasped, rest or months, not years, but Arthur's gaze hardened, the diagnosis a lens that shifted his soul. The mountains loomed vast, the air crisp with pine and coal, and life's weight settled. Hosea gone, Lenny lost, John caged, a call to mend what he could. Arthur turned to Sadie, her mettle forged through trials on the harsh life of an outlaw. On August 15th, they rode to Seasica Penitentiary, an island fortress in the Lanahetche's jaws, its walls iron and stark. The breakout wove tight. Sadie sniped guards from a skiff, her rifle a crack in the dusk. Arthur rode through reeds, his cough stifled as he cut John's chains, the boat swaying under gunfire. John emerged gaunt but alive, reunited with Abigail and Jack by August 17th near Copperhead Landing, their embrace a gleam in Arthur's fading days, his chest a furnace as he watched them slip south, Sadie's debt paid in the moon's glow. Next, he sought Rains Fall, chief of the Wapiti people, camped near Donner Falls, his gray braids a banner of peace, worn thin. The Wapiti faced doom, driven from the plains in 78, their buffalo vanished, their children felled by smallpox, now pressed by U.S. troops near Fort Wallace over oil Cornwall claimed beneath their land. Arthur rode with Rains Fall on August 20th, the air biting with frost, seeking to halt a clash that would break them. But Eagle Flies, the chief's son, flared hot, young, rash, his eyes a blaze of defiance, his braids swinging as he cursed the soldiers. Dutch saw a spark, his voice a lure by the fire, urge Eagle Flies to strike a government compound near Annesburg, a diversion for one last score, the grand haul he'd chased through the tail. Arthur balked, his cough a plea. War would doom the Wapiti, but Dutch's eyes shone, his dream a fever, Micah's whispers a prod as the camp's lanterns flickered. The mountains stood sentinel, their peaks a shroud over a gang unmoored, Dutch's plan a thread in the wind, Arthur's life a dwindling ember. The world closed in, Cornwall's rigs churned, Pinkertons circled, the swamp's humid press a memory as Annesburg's coal dust fell, the gang's fissures a chasm under sickness and schemes. With Dutch's final plan in motion, Arthur and Charles took to ride with pace to try and prevent a unwinnable war from start, but were found to be too late. Cornwall struck back, his kerosene and tar empire, forged on Texas oil in 65, funding a war to crush them. His men ambushed near Van Horn on August 25th, a crumbling trading post by the sea, its lighthouse a lonely glow through fog, its docks sagging under salt and neglect. Arthur and Charles fought them off, the air sharp with brine and gun smoke. Arthur's revolver barked, Charles's bow sang, felling 6 in the sand. But Dutch seized a darker chance. Eagle Flies, a Wapiti warrior, sought aid against the army stealing his people's land near Odenkirk. His father rains fall, begging peace, his voice soft with decades of grief. The Wapiti driven from the plains in 78, their buffalo vanished, their children ravaged by smallpox. Arthur and Rains Fall urged calm, the air thick with pine and sorrow, but Dutch saw a distraction, heartless, cold, a spark to his fading dream. Dutch's plan took root. Goat Eagle Flies to raid a U.S. compound near Heartland Overflow. Cornwall's oil rigs a prize in the chaos. On August 27th, Eagle Flies struck his war cry, ablaze through the dusk, guns clashing with soldiers as cordite mingled with oil fumes. Dutch ambushed Cornwall in the fray, confronted him near Ansburg's tracks. The Titan's coat dust-streaked, his voice a snarl of defiance. Dutch's revolver roared, Cornwall's chest bloomed red, his body slumped in the dirt, a Titan felled. Dutch's hope to ease Pinkerton pressure a grim wager. But Eagle Flies fell too, shot in the chaos, his blood on Dutch's hands as Rains Fall wept, his son's braids still in the mud. The distraction a pyre for the Wapiti's last stand. The world bore witness. Coal mines scarred the hills. Native camps dwindled under army boots. Tuberculosis reaped towns like a scythe. After Colum was left to dangle, his feud with Dutch, a grudge since '83, snapped by the rope's crack. In a twisted weave, Dutch's path cleared, Cornwall dead, Colum gone, his moral compass lost, Micah's cold guidance a shadow. Where Hosea's wisdom once stood, the cave's tension sat like a boiling pot. Eagle Flies' raid bore fruit. Dutch secured word of a train, an army payroll rolling through Ambarino, $100,000 in bonds and cash, a fortune to flee once and for all. Micah stoked the plan, his grin a venomous prod. Intercept it near O'Cree's Run, he urged, the gang's last lifeline. Arthur, his cough a death knell, his days numbered by TB's grip, agreed with a heavy heart. Little left to live for, his revolver a weary tool. The heist struck September 1st. The train rumbled through pines, dynamite roared, splitting cars as bonds spilled. Arthur fired from a ridge, his lungs searing, Sadie's rifle a crack beside him. But chaos reigned. John took a bullet, his chest red as he fell near the tracks, presumed dead. Dutch and Micah snatched the payroll, their sacks heavy with $90,000 as they fled. Back at Beaver Hollow, Pinkertons raided September 2nd, dawn, carbines blazing as Milton's men swarmed. Abigail, captured in the fray, her cries lost to the cave's echoes. The camp shattered. Tilly Jackson fled south, her hope a whisper in the wind. Others scattered, their loyalty dust. Dutch, Micah, Bill, and Javier turned cold, abandoning Abigail, their eyes on the hall, while Arthur and Sadie stood firm, their pact a thread unbroken. They rode to Van Horn on September 4th, a trading post of sagging shacks and sea mist. The Pinkertons holed a barn near the docks. The assault wove fierce. Sadie's knife slashed throats, her screams a storm. Arthur's revolver thundered, his cough a rasp as they breached. Abigail freed from ropes stained with blood. Milton faced them, his cold voice a taunt. Micah, an informant since Guarma, he spat, before Sadie's bullet silenced him, his badge glinting in the dirt, the truth a wound laid bare. The cave's rift erupted. John returned September 6th, alive but scarred, Sadie's boat having plucked him from the river's edge days prior. Dutch raged, John a rat, Pinkertons too near. Micah smirked, his whispers poison, pinning Molly's death by Susan's gun days past on betrayal. Arthur stood hoarse. He'd seen Micah with Pinkertons near Lakay, a traitor cloaked in fealty. The air thickened with shouts. Bill and Javier sided with Dutch, Sadie and Charles with Arthur, steel drawn as Dutch walked away, his dream ash, leaving Arthur and John on a ridge as Pinkertons swarmed below. Charles chose the Wapiti, staying to aid rain's fall through the tribe's bleak dawn, his bow a quiet vow as he turned north. The tale draws to its close on a windswept cliff near Katora Springs, high in the Grizzlies' west, where the gang's tattered legacy met its end beneath a sky kissed by dawn's first blush. The air bit sharp with frost and pine, the wind a keening lament through swaying branches, their needles casting jagged silhouettes on the gravel-strewn ledge. Below, the faint hiss of geysers rose from the valley, steam weaving upward as the earth murmured, a primal heartbeat beneath the stillness. The camp at Beaver Hollow lingered miles behind, its cave a fading echo of shouts and steel, the gang's ruin etched in blood and betrayal. Hosea's wisdom lost, Lenny's youth stilled, John's fate a thread Arthur held as his own frayed to its end. Arthur stood at the brink, his horse a steadfast mare, her flank pierced by Pinkerton lead, crumpling with a soft wicker, her breath a vanishing mist in the chill, his lungs seared, tuberculosis, a reaper's claw, sown months back by Thomas Downes' blood, each breath a ragged gasp as he leaned against the cliff's edge. He'd guided John here, a slow trek through the pines, the dawn's mist veiling their escape from Micah's venom and Dutch's shattered vision. John's boots struck the trail below, racing to Abigail and Jack, a family Arthur's stand would shield, his cough a hoarse hymn to their freedom as he turned to meet the storm. The gravel growled louder, a rumble beneath his boots as Micah charged. A brutal fist fight erupted in the dirt, blood and sweat staining the rising sun's glow. Micah's revolver gleamed, drawn swift, but Arthur lunged, his fist a hammer, knocking the gun from Micah's grip, the steel clattering to the stones. Fists flew, Micah's grin feral, his knuckles cracking Arthur's jaw. Arthur's blows landed heavy, a fading titan's rage, his lungs ablaze against the tide. The air thickened with grunts and the thud of flesh, dust swirling as they grappled. Micah's taunts, a vicious snarl. Rat, he spat, his treachery bare since Guarma's shores. Arthur reeled, his strength a flicker, the hawk's cry above a distant wail as he fought to buy John time, the world he'd forged, slipping through bloodied hands. Then Dutch stepped from the pines, a figure cloaked in mist, his coat frayed, his eyes alight with a remnant of the dreamer he'd been. The brawl stilled, Micah's fist raised, Arthur's breath a wheezing rasp, as Dutch strode forth, his boot slamming down on the fallen revolver, its barrel glinting in the dirt. Enough, he growled, his voice a low quake splitting the dawn, the weight of years in his stare. Hosea's loss, the gang's collapse, a dream turned ash. Micah sneered, his words a barbed Dutch's hound, he jeered. But Arthur rasped truth, his voice a blade. Micah's whispers to Milton near Lakay, a rat masked in loyalty, the noose cinched since St. Denis. Dutch's gaze flickered, the scales teetering, a breath, then two, and he stepped back, his silence a judgment, his revolver unraised. As he turned his glare to Micah, a suggestion that this is over, Micah cursed, his fist twitching, but Dutch's look held. Together they turned fled in opposite, boots crunching gravel, shadows swallowed by the pines, the gun left gleaming in the dust. Arthur sank, his strength spent, the brawl's echo a dull throb as he crawled to the cliff's edge, gravel biting his palms. The sunrise broke vast and golden, painting the land below, rolling plains, shimmering rivers, peaks crowned with snow. A beauty he'd shaped with honor and blood, a world he couldn't save. A hawk soared high, its wings cutting the blue as his breath stilled, each frail gasp a whisper scattered to the wild. His eyes lingered on the dawn, John safe with Abigail and Jack beyond the ridge. The wind singing through the trees, a final dirge as Arthur's heart ceased, his last breath a gift to the light.